Sometimes I have recent stories, and sometimes I have old stories, and sometimes I couldn't decide, so I'm not telling both. I'll just tell one. 27 years ago, in my final year at Wesley Seminary, on September the 25th, I was on a walk across campus. Now, if you've ever been to Wesley, it's not a very big campus, so it's not like huge. I was walking from one side of the campus to the other side of the campus, which takes all of 3 minutes. 2 minutes if you move a little faster, longer if you're me and you stop and talk to everybody along the way. And so that day, as I was crossing from the far side of the campus toward my class, I have no idea what class it was anymore, I saw my good friend Darren talking to some young woman out in front of Strawn Dormitory, and that young woman, Linda Patterson, later became my wife. And I thought it was a detour to say hi to Darren and meet this young woman. I already knew who Linda Patterson was. Everybody on campus knew who Linda was, everybody. So I knew who she was, but I thought, hey, she probably doesn't know who I am, so maybe she should. I don't remember what I thought. I thought it was a small detour. 26 and a half years later, I am still on this wonderful detour. And you never know what side trips are going to do on a journey of life. Now, today's story is set against that same kind of thing. Now, I want you to listen closely to this story. There's something I don't think we appreciate in today's world. We think of master storytellers as people who do a good movie, that really captures us at the beginning and keeps our interest all the way to the end. The biblical storytellers were master storytellers. And you can tell by what details they choose and what details they choose to leave out. When they give people names, they must be important. When they don't give people names, it must be because either somebody didn't remember or because that detail seemed unimportant but becomes very important. It's interesting to pick up on the context clues. So I want to read to you a passage from Luke, chapter 8, and I'm beginning in verse 40. And it says, "When Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they had been waiting for him. A man named Jairus, who was a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet. He pleaded with Jesus to come to his house because his only daughter, a 12-year-old, was dying. As Jesus moved forward, he faced smothering crowds. A woman was there who had been bleeding for 12 years. She had spent her entire livelihood on doctors, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the hem of his clothes, and at once her bleeding stopped. 'Who touched me?' Jesus said. When everyone denied it, Peter said, 'Master, dude, the crowds are surrounding you and pressing in on you. Everybody's touching you.'" Okay, that was a little James paraphrase, so but that's kind of what I get out of that little moment. But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know the power has gone out from me." When the woman saw that she couldn't escape notice, she came trembling and fell before Jesus. In front of everyone, she explained why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. "Daughter, your faith has healed you," Jesus said. "Go in peace." While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house saying to Jairus, "Your daughter has died. Don't bother the teacher any longer." When Jesus heard this, he responded, "Don't be afraid. Just keep trusting, and she will be healed." When he came to the house, he didn't allow anyone to enter with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. They were all crying and mourning for her. But Jesus said, "Don't cry. She isn't dead. She's only sleeping." They laughed at him because they knew she was dead. Taking her hand, Jesus called out, "Child, get up." Her life returned, and she got up at once. He directed them to give her something to eat. Her parents were beside themselves with joy, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. Well, this is the gospel of our Lord for this morning. Praise be to God. Well, we know Jesus is back in town. Everybody's excited to see him. And because they knew they were waiting for him. They're anxiously, with bated breath, looking forward to the time when Jesus is going to show up in town. And something very important happens. May not seem all that big of a deal to you, but it's pretty important. A guy named Jairus. Now, we know he's important. Why? Because he gets a name. He gets a name. Jairus, the important guy in town that everybody still remembers, 60 years later when the Gospel of Luke is being written, everybody remembers Jairus. For whatever reason, Jairus is the big dude in town. We still remember Jairus. So Jairus comes and does something completely uncharacteristic in Jewish society. Absolutely unspeakable. He falls at the knees of Jesus. This is a culture based on honor and shame. If you can imagine that whole kind of, if you've ever seen, samurai movies and all the honor, in Eastern culture, that's the kind of culture. This is an honor and shame culture. You don't bow down to just anybody, because when you do, you lose some of your honor. And you give them some of it. So this is a big deal. Jairus falls at Jesus' feet, and you can tell this is really important to Jairus. And it's so important to him. His only daughter is dying, that he will do whatever it takes. Now, if you've ever had a sick child, you know what that means. You know what that feels like. And if you've never had a sick child, you've had someone in your family who is sick, and you will ask, beg, plead, make any deal with God or anyone to work that out. Jairus falls at Jesus' feet and begs him. So Jesus says, sure. He sets his sight on the destination. Now, it occurs to me as I'm reading this story that this is exactly what we all do in our lives. We set our sights on a goal, on a destination, on a place to be. And that's how we measure every piece of our lives, is by how much that brings us closer to the destination or how much it keeps us from getting to the destination. Well, that was a side trip. That was, we call it here at St. James when I'm preaching, we call that chasing squirrels. Now, I chase only the squirrels that ultimately lead us back to where we're going. Of course. I don't just chase after random squirrels. They're important squirrels when I chase them. Do you understand me? So don't ever bring that up again. Fine. Now I can't remember what the point was. See? Chased a squirrel. The thing is, it's a clear sense of destination. You're either on target or you're off target. Jesus' target is apparently Jairus' house to heal this daughter. She's dying. This is pressing. Don't be wasting time. So there are all these people pressing in around Jesus, touching him. There's a lot of touching involved. And so as they're making their way, everybody's touching him, and suddenly a woman who is unnamed, maybe they just don't remember her name. I'm just going to because Luke is the best gospel when it comes to naming women. He has, even at the beginning of chapter 8, had a whole section about the women who followed Jesus. In addition to the 12, he mentions Joanna and a variety of others. So he must not have known the name of this woman. Or maybe by the time he wrote it down, no one could remember quite what the name of this woman was. But she had spent everything she had on doctors, trying to be healed from a bleeding sickness. She just was constantly bleeding. Now, to you and me, bleeding all the time, just get a little transfusion, everything will work out for you. In Jewish society, a bleeding man is an unclean man. That means can't touch other people, can't be near other people, can't go to synagogue, can't go to temple, can't ever be made clean as long as there is an issue of blood. So she's bleeding, and she has not only been sick, but she's cut off from everybody. What this means is no one has touched her in 12 years. No one was supposed to anyway. Could touch her in 12 years. Can you imagine being untouched for 12 years? You can't hold somebody's hand, you can't hug somebody, you can't greet somebody other than from a distance. And many people won't even greet you from a distance because it might rub off on them, your uncleanness. So this woman has been an outsider. And she was willing to do whatever it took to be healed. Spent all that she had, and now in what we can only imagine is a last-ditch effort, she comes to see Jesus. Only she doesn't want to talk to Jesus because she's a woman, an unnamed woman in the story. And she's been bleeding for 12 years. And she knows it's not okay if she touches him. But maybe you can imagine in your mind, maybe if she just sneaks a touch, no one will be the wiser. And maybe her life will be different. And it is. She touches him. And the power goes out. And we think that's the story. Jesus stops. He stops. Everybody's like, we got to get somewhere. Somebody's dying. You hear this? Dying, come on. You can only imagine if Jairus is still with the party. It's not clear whether he's gone ahead or whether he's leading them or what's going on. But, what are we stopping for? Hello? We got to keep going. My daughter is dying. Hello? And Jesus says, who touched me? The most absurd possible thing you can say when have you ever been on the mall for some kind of major event or jostling at Christmas time in the shopping mall? Maybe not so much these days because this mall, you just do it online. There's no jostling, but have you ever been in, jostled on all sides by people everywhere? And Jesus stops right where he is and he says, who touched me? Seems pretty obvious to us. Everybody touched him, but we know the story. See, the master storyteller's already told us somebody has snuck up behind him and touched him. And so Jesus has stopped. Peter says the obvious. If anybody is the master of the obvious among the disciples, it's Peter. He always states what everybody already knows. He's kind of like the foil against Jesus. It's like, what are we going to do about this one? I don't know. I'll just say something stupid, and it'll fit right in. Jesus, in case you didn't know, everybody's touching you. I know. And finally, the woman comes forward, and she tells her story. Now, you need to understand something. This is a woman who has been outside of society for 12 years. Outside of community for 12 years, has not been able to connect with human beings and from her religious perspective with God for 12 years. And Jesus has her she recounts her story. And he says, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace. Jesus stops a whole procession for one unnamed woman to have a conversation with her and to let her know that what she did is okay and to let everybody else know that what she did was okay and that it's fine that she touched him. And by the way, go in peace. Now, this is another little twist that it's so worth looking at. He says, go in peace. The word is shalom. Go in shalom. In Hebrew, from a Hebrew understanding, from a Jesus perspective, wholeness and shalom are the same thing. We think of it as a greeting, peace. But it means wholeness, completeness. It means everything is in place. Go and be whole, and not just be whole. I hear him saying to her, don't just be whole because your bleeding is stopped, but now go and touch your family. Go and be part of community. Go and be reconciled with all of those who may have shunned you all this time. You are healed. We think of healing as like excising tumors. When we pray to God to fix something, we want God to reknit the tendon or whatever it is. We want God to fix it like that. But from a biblical perspective, healing is the wholeness of the person. It's a wholeness of heart, a wholeness of spirit, a wholeness of mind. and as much as possible, a wholeness of body. For her, it's the whole package. Go in peace. Go be whole because of your encounter. Now, of course, we know how the story goes. Jesus is not making it to the destination on time. Jairus' people show up and say, dude, don't bother the teacher anymore. Your 12-year-old's dead. Jesus said, she's just taking a nap, and takes care of that too. But do you notice what he does? Now, see, this is why it's so important to read these stories and look at them and realize we are called to apprentice with Jesus. And by apprenticing, and why we're calling it apprenticing, why we're talking about it, is because it's meant to be a lifestyle. It's meant to shape everything about us. If you look at this man, he stopped and made that moment important. How many of us miss opportunities because we know where we're supposed to be and we're going there? I can't tell you how many times in my life I was in a rush to get to a meeting and passed by somebody on the side of the road who needed help changing a tire. Did I jump out of my car and do it? Well, once or twice probably in my entire 55 years of life I've done that. But most of the time I've passed by. Most of the time I'm so focused on getting to the destination I miss the chance. You know, 27 years ago, I could have been so focused on getting to class that I missed an opportunity to meet this young woman standing in front of Strawn Dormitory. Sometimes, even when we do mission trips, you know, one of the most important things they tell us when we go on Appalachian Service Project, we repair homes. We spend a week doing it in Appalachia, which is the third world of the United States. One of them, anyway. And we go in and help folks. But we're about building relationships. That's what they tell you from the first moment. You're fixing houses, but you're building relationships. That's the most important thing you can do with each other and other kinds of things. Last Saturday, not yesterday, but the week before, we did rebuilding together. We didn't quite leave having gotten to the destination, despite the fact that our destination was a complete house by the time we left. And this was the longest project we've ever been involved in. We got there in the morning, and some folks did not leave until like 9:30 at night. They were there. Some people were on roofs, hammering in shingles with broken ribs and other kinds of things. Crazy people. They were there until 9:30, and there were still some things that didn't quite get done. But you know what? While I was there, I got to know Alex Barita better because we worked together on team. I got to know Marquise better because we worked on a team. Because we built relationships. Because we made connections. You see, sometimes you miss that on the way because you're so focused on getting where you're going that you miss the possibilities right there. Every Friday morning, I go to the food pantry at Lorton Community Action Center. If you know me, I am terrible at task orientation. I'm a relational person, terrible at tasks. My job, and I'm not even sure I always do that very well, is to give out cereal and snacks. I give out cereal and snacks. I let people have a choice. What kind of cereal would you like? Are you sure you want a sugar cereal? You know, that's not really good for you. Maybe you should have, I don't usually say that. I don't say that. If you want a sugar cereal, I'll search until we find something filled with dextrose and sucrose and everything else in there, fructose, and you mix it in. But the most important piece to me on a Friday morning, besides making the food manager's job a little easier, is to connect with the clients, the folks that come in, and connect with my fellow volunteers. That's my real gift. They let me do this because, quite frankly, cereals and snacks may be more than I can really handle in life. Sometimes there are 3 people that have gone by while I'm still sorting through, cereals, trying to find the right cereal for this one person that's been in line. But you see, sometimes if we get so focused on the product, which is making sure they get a box of cereal and 6 snacks for a family, a small family, and a large snack and 4 additional snacks for a large family. If we become so focused on those numbers, we miss the chance to really connect with the people that we sit with, that we talk to. You know, I don't know what your destination is sometimes. You know, maybe you really have to be at that meeting at 11 o'clock. I was raised in a household, my father, told me, you are not on time unless you're 15 minutes early. You're not on time. You are not on time unless you're 15 minutes early. Oh my gosh, that is just messed up. I still live like that sometimes. So that's probably why I never stop and talk to me. But it's not true anymore. It's not true. Because learning to be where we are is learning to be like Jesus. You know, you all think this whole stopping and breathing thing is crazy. Some of you are just look at me. What the heck? All right, fine. We'll placate him. It's another squirrel the boy is chasing, but fine. But you see, if you stop and breathe, you create a spaciousness inside of you. This place where God can just take that moment and remind you. You know, centering prayer is probably not for everybody. I think it's a wonderful tool in my life. I do it every morning. I can't not do it. If I know I got to be somewhere, I get up extra early because I got to do centering prayer. And the reason I've got to do centering prayer is it creates a space inside of me so that I've just changed my awareness just a little bit. So God has opened my heart a little bit so that when I go through the day, and I need that spaciousness, I just bring my sacred word to mind, take a breath, and I might be able to be in that moment. Now, I would be lying to you if you said I never miss a moment now. I see somebody at the side of the road, I stop and chat to them. Sometimes I do. And sometimes I still miss it completely. Sometimes God probably opens these great big ministry opportunities in my life, and I'm somewhere else. I'm already here. I've made it my practice now that I walk to church. That's only 7/10 of a mile. I'm not suggesting any of you live in Springfield. You'd have to get up at 5 in the morning and walk here, and it's a long walk here, and then by the daytime, not so good. But the truth is, take a walk every once in a while. If you can walk to someplace close enough to your house, you see things you never saw before. And sometimes you meet neighbors you never met before. And you see the glory of God in the tiny little flowers that grow at the side of the road that you can't see when you're driving by at 25, 45, 85 miles an hour. Not speaking personally. You miss life. What if? This is the question I want you to hang with just a second. What if ministry happens not when you get to the destination, but along the way? If you read the Gospels closely, Jesus' ultimate destination, according to each one of the Gospel writers, is ultimately Jerusalem, for his final journey there. That's his ultimate thing. So every stop along the way is a side journey. And yet you and I are some of Jesus' side journeys. Jesus wants to hang with us. Jesus wants to stop along the way, even if I am sometimes the slowest member of the Jesus community. It's like the Jesus parade. We're trying to get somewhere, and James is like, stop the smell of... I'm like the child at the soccer game, the 4-year-old who, the soccer ball rolls by, and they're watching the butterfly. Look, there's a blue bird. And, usually they're the goalie, and it goes right past them, and the other parents are like, and so, that's me. That's me. And God stops in the person of Jesus to collect me and to stand with me and to be in awe about the butterfly or the stinking little flower that's growing at the side of the road, and says, this is good too. This is good too. If Jesus can stop in perhaps what would be considered the most important ministry ever in history from a Christian perspective, along the way and talk to nobodies, quote unquote, what does it say about us that we are busy getting to the next somebody? If I understand it correctly, there's not any nobodies in God's kingdom, only somebodies. And the only people who think that they're nobodies are the people who don't know that everybody's a somebody. And oftentimes it's because they don't know that they're a somebody. If you don't know you're a somebody, you need to know it. You're God's somebody. And in St. James, you're our somebody too. You matter. Your life matters. And you can communicate that to the whole world around you if every once in a while you stop and smell a rose or speak to a neighbor or ask somebody how they are. Everybody's in a rush. But do you have 5 seconds? Do you have maybe 5 minutes? If I called you out of the blue and said, I'm in a terrible way. I'm in a terrible way. My life is coming unglued. Could you meet me for coffee? I bet you there's not a single one of you here that wouldn't meet me for coffee. I know it. I know it. You might say, I don't know why James called me. He must be really desperate. I don't know what I'm going to tell him. If his life's coming apart, oh my gosh, he's a pastor and everything. God's holding him together by string. I don't know. I don't know. So what about the stranger? The person who needs us is waiting right in front of you. And sometimes you're too busy looking past him at what's next to see him. So, I got some practices for you. You know, it's always about practice, because practice makes perfect, although it doesn't. Practice means you get to keep practicing. As you get better, you'll learn new practices to sharpen yourself even more. I want you to stop. Not right this minute. You don't have to stop right now. You've got to keep listening to me. But this week, sometime when you're on your way somewhere else, and if you're like me, you're not on time unless you're 15 minutes early, leave 20 extra minutes early. Stop somewhere along your journey. Just stop there and listen. Pull over to the side of the road. Or if you're walking to the bus, stop. And don't get in the middle of the crowd and everybody's running you over and you're an obstruction. Pull off to the side. Just step off to the side. Stop and listen to what's going on around you. Sit on a park bench. Sit on a bench in the mall. I love watching people there. I love watching people in the mall. Some of the things they say, some of the things they do. It's the most entertaining place I could ever go. Who needs television? Go to the mall. It's like a soap opera there too sometimes. You'll see somebody, if you look closely enough, that needs to hear from you. Just say hi. I don't know. But practice stopping and being where you are. If nothing else, breathe. You're going to keep doing that, but be aware of your breath. Be aware of your breath.